Hey, everybody. Welcome to our little live stream that we're going to be playing with tonight, watching the VP debate. We're going to try to make it tolerable by hanging out with you all. I brought my buddy, Steve Friend. It's probably the only way we're going to be able to watch this. How's it going, Steve?
Oh, I'm just ready and raring to go. I'm staring at the thumbnail, just laughing because you're like the kid in the cafeteria who like mixed that concoction and then dared people to drink it, which is what you're doing today with politics.
That's what we got to do. All right, so a couple little things. We'll do some housekeeping, and then we'll get this thing rocking and rolling. Number one, I'm going to just say that the stream is brought to you by my friends over at Patriot Coolers. I don't know if that's true. Why not? We'll just plug them because I'm going to be drinking out of this all day, all evening. This is my Suspendables, the Major, not the Sergeant Major, which Tim Walz claimed to be and wasn't. PatriotCoolers.com, promo code KYLE, save yourself 10%. Get yourself this monster. This thing will hold 40 ounces. I was laughing. My wife was like, ooh, it's a 40. It is a 40. I'll talk about it more on other programs. I did an unboxing of the day. You guys can check that out. Also, we'll just say thanks to all of you that are part of our locals, which I see some of you guys are out there. They said a dynamite countdown just for you. KyleSerafin.com if you guys want to sign up for the locals. KyleSerafin.com is how you get there and you join our team. You can be part of the interior of what the heck we got going on. We got some things planned. We've had some things that have been punching out. And here's my man. Let's see what we got, because I don't know if NBC, give me 1 second here, Steve, because we're going to find out if these suckers are going to be rocking and rolling yet. Oh, they're almost ready. Do you want to hear what they have to say? Let's hear what the ladies have to say. They're getting introduced.
Candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator.
Dramatic music.
The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns. The stage is set. Governor, Senator, thank you for joining us. Let's get started.
Nobody believes you, ladies.
Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene. And now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining at home tonight.
He's panicking.
Let's keep in mind where this started.
I love
October
they
7th,
said there's
Hamas
40,000 troops, and then last time they said there were
massacred
no
over
troops
1,400
in
Israelis
combat.
and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago, a nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together. Understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the Vice President said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me. And she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump, who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years. And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about what the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. Nora?
Margaret, thank you. Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes
Oh my God, we're going to go to climate
larger,
change, number 2.
Climate change.
and more deadly because of the historic rainfall.
Scientists said it.
Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane, because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible. And then, of course, afterwards, to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job. And I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America, because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Governor Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane, and my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together. So all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover, but we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts,
how many 500-year
floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wheat. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes
Steve,
sense.
when he's done answering, I want to know
thinking about
who you're
how
giving
do
the
we
point
mitigate
to on
these
each one.
disasters.
Thank you. Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years. Senator. Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing worse by the climate. Senator, your time is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil. But the folks know, and like I said, again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our number one export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And
is it Tim, the number one export topsoil?
We're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that, and an all-above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate.
Oh, we're just going to just say what the answer is?
Say whatever we want.
We're going to turn now to immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters. Senator Vance, your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil?
Senator Vance, you look like you actually have an answer.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember, When she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Governor, do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this is a
Specifically what to
crisis of
respond
this,
to.
the opioid
Yeah, they
crisis.
let him know
And
what
the
he
good
needs to
news on
talk
this
about.
is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history, 30% decrease in Ohio, but there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this, and that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up these
5,000 allowed
the adjudications
in a
on
day.
this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no. Told them to vote
he was going to
against
do it
because
Walz was?
it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him to, what would Donald Trump talk about if
The
we actually did
mannerisms are
some of
coming
these things?
through.
And they
He's
need
not
to be
a
done
really good
by the
communicator. He's
legislature.
very,
You can't
yeah,
just do this through the executive branch.
itchy.
So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this, and he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling them what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules, and it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fixed this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue
We fixed it with a bill that didn't pass.
Already fixed it, didn't pass.
You demonize it. And we saw this. And Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this,
50+%.
talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified
You
a
lost
large
a
number
bunch
of
of
people who were
kids.
here legally in the community of Springfield. The
All
Republican
kinds of
governor
kids.
said, it's not true. Don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could
don't
come
think he wants to
and
come
solve
together with
this
you, bro. That sounds
if we
gross.
didn't let Donald Trump
Lindsey Graham
continue to
would.
make it an issue.
Lindsey would.
And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize
Why do
other
we keep
human
saying
beings.
dehumanize?
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question
Let me
first.
just tell you something that you have to answer.
The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been. And it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield.
He took a lot of offense to that one.
In Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this.
Did you ever help craft a bill as an agent?
I have actually.
Only after you got tossed out, I think.
Blaming migrants for everything. On housing,
you know what happened after they tossed my bill? I didn't keep talking about it.
Buying up housing and making them less affordable. But it becomes a blame.
This is his only thing he can talk about on this issue. This issue is a loser for the
necessary
Democrats.
To adjudicate. Yeah. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make
90
a
days.
difference.
Let them through. 90 days.
To what we know, American principles. Look, I don't talk
Who are you
about
giving
my
your point
faith a
to?
lot. But Matthew
Vance
25:40
but it was mostly on the topic. I still think the
me.
presentation between the two of them, I mean, just the way that they communicate, Vance is so much more smooth that the normie is going to feel like this is that Vance is just a superior communicator. I mean, just like look at the visual. The visual is striking.
For our viewers,
I think
Springfield,
you're
Ohio
right.
does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status,
who keep
temporary
eating the
protected
cats
status.
and the dogs.
No, it's the
They're
dogs.
eating
We
the
have so
people's
much to get
pets.
to.
Margaret, I think it's important
We're
because
going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Oh, he's going to fight
the
him.
rules were that
The
you guys weren't
economy-
going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's
Nice.
actually going on.
Nicely
So there's an
done.
application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That
Thank
is
you,
the
Senator.
facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret,
Own 'em.
by
Thank
our
you,
own
Senator, for
leadership.
Just
describing
keep going.
the legal
Just keep
process.
going.
We have
Kamala
so much
Harris
to get
opened up
to,
that
Senator.
pathway.
We have
We'd like to
so
go
much-
over and
since
just skip this.
1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
We want to
CBP One
have.
app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
They muted
Gentlemen,
him. These
the audience
horrible
can't hear you
pieces
because
of
your
garbage.
mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank
Gentlemen,
you for
we
explaining
let
the
two
legal
Karens
process.
run the show, so it's going to
Nora.
happen. Let me
Thank you,
just turn
Margaret.
them down just a
The
little bit.
economy
Okay,
is
Steve,
a
what do you
top
have to say? You're more important than them.
voters.
I can't get over the fact that they're like ping-ponging back and forth to each other. They're like, thank you, Margaret. Thank you. The way they're so
They're playing footsie. They're
going back
knocking
and forth is
high
so
heel
unnatural.
shoes together.
That was a good move by Vance. It really was. He was
he
was
crushed it.
polite. He was polite as he did it. He wasn't, very like demonstrative or angry.
What I
Walz
realize is that these
comes off as
questions are
angry.
irrelevant because they're going to answer what they want, but they're also going to feed it to
And
whoever they want.
Kamala Harris
The
and
only
I
bad
do
thing was
believe
he
in
said
the middle
illegal
class
migrant,
because
not
that's where we
illegal
come
alien.
from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be
you
listening
said
to
that
how's
we
this
can't
gonna
have free
impact
speech, though,
me.
Tim.
The bold
did.
forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down down payment
The federal
assistance on
government's
the
gonna
front
do
end to get you in a house.
houses.
A house
Build
is
high
much
rises.
more than just an asset to be traded
suburban
somewhere. It's foundational to where
ranches.
you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the $35 insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin.
Come on, we got
they were
insulin,
charging
now talk about how you
$800
fix the
before this
pipes.
law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis. Prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit.
How
We
is
have one in
defunding the police
Minnesota.
going in
Reduces
Minneapolis?
childhood poverty by a third. We save money in the long run, and we
Watch
do the
this.
right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago. He said, "You're rich as hell. I'm going to give you a tax cut." He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it, it would increase inflation, and potentially
about
lead to
taking
a recession.
unrealized
Look, this is
gains
simple
and
for
taxing
you.
them?
Where are we
Would that
going? Kamala
destabilize?
Harris has said to do the things she wants to do. We'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best, more people
Come
are
back.
participating in it,
What's our
and
fair
folks
share?
have the things that they need.
Define it, Tim.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis.
Similarly,
of
let me
the
do a
Trump
quick
plan,
let me
and
pile on
says
here.
it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer, a lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do. And some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies, and what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%, open the American southern border and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plan, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom, because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts, but if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that.
The artificial
that was day one, whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this.
You made a question about what?
Can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, or whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years, and the last year as president? That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop, and we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy.
You're getting crushed. Can you fix it?
If you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my community, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over.
The states got to do dirty things like make their own laws.
Right to work states?
Venture capital in some cases.
You don't have the right to work.
Into companies that you can't work. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Should be a criminal record.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics show that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here, because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you've simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on health care then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to ahead.
We've got a lot,
gentlemen. On many
listen, we've got a lot
topics,
to get
right
to, so
now,
we're not
I
going to be able to sit here and hang out in your you're dominating. So let's just move on, okay?
We're going to say personal qualifications. Do you think they bring up stolen valor?
All right, who takes that point?
It's a clean sweep. 3 from 3 for Vance.
I've got it at 5.
During the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989.
We're going to talk about Chinese.
But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year.
Oh, he lied about more travel?
Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400.
Which is close to Chinese.
You rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17. Worked on family
proud of the
farms,
service of riding his bike.
Retire command sergeant major
to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people. working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything, many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on.
We haven't had a Project 2025 yet.
I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
He's going to take that one.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just... That's what
I just wasn't where I said it was.
So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Oh, just play this over and over again.
You learned a lot
Thank you, Governor.
From governance
Senator
from
Vance,
China.
in 2016, you called your running mate, Donald Trump, unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments.
But we're still going to ask you again.
And explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate. And
you're calling out one for going to communist China and the other one for criticizing his running mate. It's not even a apples to apples comparison.
Right, but when he went to communist China, he said he was there when he wasn't. I just don't care what these women have to say.
And he learned a lot about government when he was there.
He sure did.
When he was there diddling little kids.
Here we go.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out to messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration, it's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support?
Cuticle in the birth canal.
That's not what the bill says. But look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind.
No, it's
Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade. 52 years of personal autonomy.
Yeah,
and then he
good.
tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now,
We're talking
when God
about
asked about
exceptions.
that,
That's what
Senator
we're here to
Vance
talk
said
about,
two
Steve.
wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human rights. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about health care. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in health care for a reason. We trust women, we trust doctors.
Senator,
Maternal
do you want to
mortality might have
respond
to
to
do
the
with the
governor's claim?
poison
Will you
jabs that
create
she'd
a
like to push down
federal
on people?
pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman
she just wanted to go to North Carolina
in that
and
journey
her baby when she was
back and
there.
forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography?
It's not your body.
There's a very
more about
real
the
chance
mandates
had
there,
Amber
Chief.
Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice
In
President
Minnesota,
Harris
they
talk
kill
about this
so
subject, and
many
you hear me
babies.
talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, it was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, you know, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position.
Well, Walz talks to his side. I would have liked to see Vance
do a better job at winning back people's
but he's
trust.
kind of on a
So many
leash, so
young
I got to
women
give to Walz.
would love to have families. So many young women also
People
see
that are voting on
unplanned
this,
pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust.
Everyone's hearing what they want.
And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing.
No matter what Vance says, he's going to be seen as like a radical handmaid's tale by the people who want to murder babies.
Yeah.
So he might as well just lean into it, but he doesn't do it. Neither does Trump. That's a campaign decision. They think that they can thread the needle on it.
All right, let's hear this idiot.
We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own
That's why
choice.
we want to murder all the
what
babies. Half of them are
implications
women.
are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure
Physicians
that we're
have to follow
educating
all
our
kinds of
children
laws.
and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy
You don't
rates.
have options. He
We
just wants you to
understand
murder the
that
baby.
too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000
side-by-side
child
is
tax
not
credit,
good for
but we're
Tim
not
Walz.
going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator.
First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe
a lot of people that got murdered in the
you're
womb.
free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written
It's such
to
a
try and
weird
make a point,
take.
that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But
this.
how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting against, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals. They get early childhood education.
They get meals in Minnesota.
So hiding behind we're going to do all these other things
government-funded
when you're
lunch.
not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
Places where people who are Christian.
If you're not torn limb from limb in the womb, we're going to give you a box lunch.
They fact-checked it with President Trump.
Box lunch.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move
got a
on.
lot
We're
to
going
get
to be
to.
right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in just a moment.
Look at them. They look so nice. All right, Steve. What are we doing here?
It's more substantive than the presidential debate.
It is. It's got a lot more to it than we saw in the other. So that's not nothing.
It bodes better for the individual who has the facts on his side. I think I'm sort of stunned that they hadn't spent most of the time on the environment and abortion, because those would have been the ones that would have been right in Walz's lane. But I think that Vance has done a really good job. Every single time he's answered, he has brought it back to the economy. You can't afford it, regardless of what the issue is. If it was abortion, well, the reason that women want to get abortions is because they can't afford to have the kid. If it's the environment, well, the reason that gas is so high, it's because we're not drilling at home because you're just making everything else so expensive. I think that's pretty much what I'd have advocated for as well.
Yeah, okay. So we had some walkaway lines, folks. I'm going to throw the chat up on the screen here while we're talking. We had some great options for some walkaway lines. What I would like to see, although I don't think it's very likely, I would very much enjoy seeing J.D. Vance FaceTime some troops in a conflict zone right now, in an active war zone, and then see if they want to chat with Tim.
How about
Gary.
Minnesota National Guardsmen?
That would be even better, because I almost can guarantee that there are some people from some troop somewhere around the world that are deployed and probably involved in some violence. So that would be kind of good. We had some other funny ones today. What else were we kind of like kicking around as ideas that would be total walk-offs?
Man, we needed to have we said that Trump should have just walked off the stage, so we had to war game it. Let's see. We said, hand Timmy a tampon.
Hand Timmy a tampon and just say, this is pretty good in combat zones. These are actually very effective at stopping bleeds. You might be needing this later.
Now that I've seen the side-by-side, if it could be somehow relayed to Vance, they're not standing close to each other, but the image on the TV is he could be ducking as Walz is gyrating unnecessarily. Like, Tim, what's going on here? You having some spastic issue?
Yeah, take it easy. Those hands are coming my way.
He's got the kung fu. I mean, the side-by-side to me is not as bad as the Biden-Trump debate, because that was catastrophic, but it benefits Vance. I mean, he's a good-looking guy. He's clearly much younger. He carries himself poised. A lot more confidently.
Yeah.
And he's not scowling as his opponent is just trying to say whatever it is, even if it's a fair point or not. He just kind of nods along and smiles, and it almost says there you go again, smile. And then Tim Walz, he turns 90 degrees and stares at Vance as he's talking, and Tim Walz has resting bitch face, so it's not a good look for him, especially that side profile.
Yeah, it's kind of tragic. He looks like he's outmatched. He looks like he's uncomfortable, and I'm trying to be as objective as possible. We've got it scored right now as 5-1 against there. These included some of the follow-up questions, but I think that other than the abortion issue, which is only going to go to Walz because people who are really interested in killing babies only want to hear about babies being killed, there is no defense, and I agree with you. They could lean into this a lot harder.
How about
they could just be like, look, I'm a Christian. You shouldn't kill babies. The states are going to solve the problems the way they want. If you want to live in a place where you can have an abortion, move to a place where you can have an abortion.
I appreciated the talking over the moderators and then just continuing to go and forcing them to mute him, but doing it in a very polite way. I mean, it was an alpha move that there's no way that Tim Walz would ever try.
I'm watching the live stream on the other side here. I'm just kind of waiting to come back to it. And for some reason, they just showed a rocket ship blasting off, which really gave me some flashbacks to my little intro video, which is kind of funny. End of the day, we're probably biased because it's what we want to hear. But I do think that...
Can you play the Project 2025 alert? We've only gotten one so far. I need to have at least 2 for the night to make it worth it.
Oh no, it's Project 2025.
That's just for you, Steve. That's just for you. All right, they're back on. They're back on. Let me put these clowns back on.
Maybe they're teetotalers. It was a drinking game prop, and it didn't work.
Death for children and teens in America.
Leading cause of death. Are we going to do guns?
Yeah,
guns.
Oh, yes,
guns.
here we
You
go.
oppose most gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of three beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartel. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that. Governor,
you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress,
he played volleyball
in my
That's the most
office,
disturbing thing I've heard.
Surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents. And they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead. And they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out.
To violate it.
In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that work.
Is he talking about?
I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools.
Oh.
They don't have this happen.
I was checking out the kids
even
in
though
the
they
Finnish
have a high gun ownership rate in the country.
They weren't as good as the Chinese.
There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not
Finnish
infringing on your
school
Second
model.
Amendment. And the
It is.
idea
That's
to
what it
have
is.
some of these weapons out there,
All
it just doesn't
laws.
make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but
California, by the way, is one of the stupidest places in the nation to live and own guns. I just ignored the gun laws when I lived there.
You actually had guns there.
I
That's
didn't even know what the gun laws were. I used to go out to the national forest and just go like shoot. I'd bring like 24 bottles and go shoot a 300 Win Mag from like a couple hundred yards out and blast them. And I was like, just like I'm an American. Constitution is my permit. KMA, baby.
Birthright. You can carry anywhere if you don't give a damn.
That's right.
I'm sorry about that, and I hope that you're doing okay. Christ have mercy. It is awful, and I appreciate what Tim said actually about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is okay. First of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health. Substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was an NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today. And several things I want to mention on this is talking about cities and where it's at. The number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children
you should ban the
getting
guns
and
because the
shooting
people who
themselves.
commit suicide
And
definitely
so
won't find a tall
we
building.
have, and we should look at all of the
other
issues.
options.
Making sure
And
folks
they're
have
definitely
health care
doing
and
it
all
with
that, but I
long
want to be
guns,
very
too.
careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start
Come on, throw
looking
your
for
son
a
out there.
scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns, and there are things that you can do about it. But I do
Come
think
on,
that this is
JD.
one, and I think
It's
this is a
just the
healthy
guns?
conversation.
It's the
I think there's a
guns' fault.
capacity to find
I
solutions
knew
on
it.
this.
Wait,
that
did you
work,
just say it's
protect
the
Second
guns'
Amendment,
fault?
protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. Let's turn now to the
So many
top
thank yous.
contributor to inflation.
The top contributor to inflation is people who sign bills that make inflation. Okay, go
more
ahead.
than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes to the high housing prices. Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes.
Under what
Where
authority?
Are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not
Yes.
handing
That's
out.
the first fair question
Let me
I've
say
heard.
this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around.
It's legitimately
Those
a
are not
commodity.
living in
Asset.
those
Yes,
houses.
it's a
Those of you
commodity.
listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was.
Because I have
and when I
no-
think of a house,
He's not good with money.
I'm thinking of Christmas
I have no
services
savings at
after
all. I'm
midnight
completely
mass
dependent on
when
my
you go
pension.
with your family. We need to
He doesn't
make
have a
it
stock
more affordable. And one of the
portfolio.
things, as I said,
Nothing.
Why do we
Doesn't
need
have
to make it more
401k.
that the
affordable?
vice president is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in
kinda, like,
making sure
dropped
our
his volume
housing
down a little
was
bit
the
so I could
biggest
talk over him
investment
better.
that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there.
I like JD's over
one
here
of the-
going like, you have no money
certainly for me,
because you don't know how money works.
using the GI Bill was
I
one
pulled
thing.
myself
You're
up
a-
on
you're a
other
flipping
veterans
tard,
home
dude.
loan. I'm rich
The
now.
big thing about a veteran's home loan is
me-
you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are
Yeah,
things
that's
that
awesome.
make it.
Guess
Now,
what? You
look,
still
you're
have to
gonna
have money
it
to pay the
back,
mortgage,
and
dummy.
You're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one
It's
city
on
where
fire.
we've seen
It's
the
actually
lowest
on- oh, it's
inflation
not
rates.
anymore. We
We've
put it
seen
out.
a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's
Dude,
what
the
we
point
know.
of down
People
payments
with
is so that
stable
the bank
housing
actually
end
knows
up
that
with
you
stable
you
jobs.
have
good
something
for
at
the
stake.
money.
Housing, have their
It's
kids
so
able to
crazy.
be able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common
This
ground.
dude's
in.
never had a
But we
job
can't
in
blame,
Can't see anything else other than, I
immigrants
mean,
for the
honestly,
only
you
reason.
can't see
That's
anything
not
else
the
other
case.
than
It's
the
happening in
government
many
doing
cities.
everything.
The fact of the matter is that we
It's
don't
really
have
telling
enough
when you've never
naturally
had a real
affording,
job outside of government.
affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your
do it
time
at the-
is
like
up.
the
Senator
county level, at
Vance,
the
as
worst.
far as your campaign's
Should never be a
position, the
state.
promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate
Apparently they're gonna do it on
relief?
BLM
You have
land.
2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens? If you lower energy prices, as Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill, one of the biggest drivers of housing costs aside from illegal immigration is, think about it, if a truck driver is paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods, too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where, Governor, we will get to you in a moment. But, Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should
He's gone back to the same points that he's been really disciplined.
Who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is letting in.
Well, of course,
what about the allegation that she's currently the vice president?
Not to fact check, I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office, but it's again blaming and not trying to find a solution. I'm going to need stats on that one. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western
He has no
part
idea
of
what
the
he's talking about. He's probably never been on public land.
There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue.
So it's not fair to Minnesota?
He doesn't understand the federal lands issue.
That was,
it's not fair. They're going to have more houses in New Mexico. I'm going to lose people in my state.
Fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities.
Why does he keep saying that?
Money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments.
Don't screw up
that gets people in. And
public
I'm still
lands, but
on the fact on this.
But he's like, I've never been to public lands. I have no idea.
Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor, your time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices.
He had that ready.
Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
Got him.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't
Am I
necessarily
allowed, ma'am?
disagree
Am
with
I
that,
allowed?
that in some cases, many
Yeah,
of
he's
those
such
are
a
local,
freaking beta.
many of them are state. I don't know
Vance
which
just
ones are
talked right
federal,
over
but
him.
I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you, gentlemen.
Congress doesn't write regulations about your house,
We have a
dude.
lot to get to.
You're living on
passionate
another
about
planet.
the
We have a
housing
lot to
crisis,
get to in
I
the
can
last
tell.
14
Building
minutes.
codes are
Thank
usually
you.
done locally.
One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care.
Here we
Senator
go.
Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump
Abortions
was
are too
asked
expensive,
about
Steve.
replacing the Affordable Care Act.
You need to bring
In
down those
response,
baby
he
motors.
said, I have
2-for-1
concepts
specials.
of a plan.
Listen, why on earth do we keep acting like the federal government is supposed to give you health care? I don't even have I don't have health insurance right now. I haven't had it in 2 years. I just have cash. And if I need it, I'm so weirded out by this country.
Everything comes
Live on
from
the
the
edge,
government.
Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. Look, it's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears. And it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced
$35
pricing
insulin coming back
transparency.
from
You think
Walz.
about
Here it comes.
healthcare, you go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done, but when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care.
That's not winning my vote.
It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do, but I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better health care policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being
I'm able
an
to
old guy gives you some
actually see
history. I was there
what Tim
at the
Walz has been
creation
drawing.
of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic,
and lots of
home
attention to
Medical
detail.
Alley,
Now, that one's too old.
3M,
He likes the smaller ones.
Medtronic, all of those.
Small
We
children.
understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you.
Because you're giving
now,
a
Donald
healthcare
Trump
to
all of a
illegal
sudden
aliens.
wants to. Go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma,
You don't
too
have
bad.
them anymore?
If you're a woman,
You lose
probably
them?
not.
Yeah.
Broke your foot during football,
sounds good.
might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for
Can
the
you
first
imagine
time
getting kicked off
with
your parents'
Medicare.
healthcare
We have
plan by the age of
10
26?
drugs that
That's
will come
unbelievable.
online, the
That's
most common
unbelievable.
ones that'll be there. But look, this issue.
don't even
and
have a
when
government to
Donald
give it
Trump
to you.
said, I've got a
Hold on,
concept
we
of
have
a
a-
plan. It cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But
all right.
what Senator
Teachers
Vance
teaching
just
fourth grade,
explained
dude.
might be worse than a concept because
Here's a
what
bad
he
thing.
explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as
some
possible because
breaking news
I
coming
have
in.
done this for a long time. What they're saying is If you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why
Did
the
he
system
just say he
didn't
has
work.
cancer?
Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Tim Walz.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect
low-key dropped
people
off
with
that he's
How
got
pre-existing
cancer.
dare those
conditions
insurance
or laid out
companies
that plan.
give lower rates
Look,
to
we
healthy
currently
people?
have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened, and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight, is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher. And he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people, whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then
So
what
you
happens
think the
is
individual mandate's a good idea?
you shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works.
Oh, everybody has to pay.
Everybody has to do it,
You
yeah.
are asking
I
pre-ACA
don't want to
where we
pay
get
for
people
your
out.
cancer,
Look,
dude.
people know that they need to be on health care. People expect
No,
it
they
to
don't.
be
I don't.
there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market,
F you, bro.
when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then
And
when
we
you
make
get
everybody
sick
else
and
pay
old,
for it.
it's there for you. Because
And
I hear
illegal
people say,
aliens.
well, I don't
How
want
are we
to
gonna
buy
pay
into
for those
Medicare or
legal
whatever.
aliens?
Good
We
luck
gotta
buying
make the young,
healthcare once
healthy
you get
people like
past
the
70.
Seraphins
So look,
pay.
the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating
She
those
made
10
everything
drugs on
better.
Medicare for the first time in American history.
She's like bacon.
Thank you. Margaret,
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of time. We have a number
I'm
of
sorry.
subjects to discuss. Margaret, let's talk about
sorry.
families.
Lots more
in
subjects. Lots more
America.
subjects in 8 minutes.
There is a child care crisis
Sure.
in this country, and the United States is one
What?
of the very few developed countries.
That's because women are at
in
work.
the world
Go home, women.
Without a
Stop
national
going to work.
paid leave
Take care of your
program for
babies.
new
Well, I mean, they're
parents.
just going to say the
Governor
solution to this
Walz,
is just
you
murder them.
said that if Democrats win
other
both
option,
the
I
White
guess.
House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's
Oh.
what the deal is.
Why? Why
Americans
does,
sitting out there
why does
right
Congress
now,
have anything
you
to do
may
with that?
work for a
Yeah,
big
it's
company.
negotiable.
We're home
If
in
your employer
Minnesota
says
to some of the
no, then
largest
it's
Fortune
no.
500 companies.
Go
Kamala
work
Harris knows
somewhere
that are in California. Those companies provide paid family and medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family and medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work. 5
Nobody
days
cares
after my
about
kids were
Minnesota.
born. This allows you to stay
Nobody
home
lives
a
in
certain amount
Minnesota.
of time.
Sorry, Minnesota.
What we know
Your-
is
your
that gets the
bona
child off to a
fides
better start
as
than
You have
executive
Somalis.
there
anyone
are
else.
not
Let's stay
worth
in their
anything.
employers. We get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a
Send the
priority. We
women
implemented it in
home.
Minnesota, and we see growth. That's how you
them
become
home.
a pro-business state. But the
can
negotiations
bring in more
on it,
illegals
and
if you
here's the
want, but
issue.
only the men can
Those
work.
big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you
No
get
shoes
cancer
allowed for the females.
or your child
Hold on,
gets
he's
sick.
done cancer
We know
again.
what
He's really
happens.
fixated on this
You end
cancer
up
thing.
staying home. In some cases, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case
it's the
of
world
an
I'm living
economy
in.
that
That's
Donald
'cause
Trump has
mandate.
set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's
Yeah.
willing to
Who
give
amongst
those
us? I mean, is there anybody
tax
that you
breaks
know in our
to the
circle who
wealthiest.
might have gone without a
He's willing
paycheck?
to say, bust those unions
14
up,
months,
do
homie.
whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works
When
for
we
all of
force
us.
you to
And
do
so
what we
paid family
say.
medical leave
If you
program
just
has
listened, I had to
been
just, 14 months, no paycheck. I was all right. It
Huh.
wasn't ideal. I had a baby during that time too, bro. Do you know that? Paid out of pocket. Yeah, go figure.
You can do that? I
I
thought
had
you had to murder
unlimited.
them.
I had unlimited family leave because I had no job.
And we have to make it easier
Great paternity program at the Bureau.
to get into
Yeah,
that business
way
and then
better.
to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as
wanna
the best
get a
state.
total
We're still
number
in
of
crisis
times
on
he
this.
said the word Minnesota.
A federal program of paid family and medical leave and help with this
I need him
will
to say
enhance
the
our
things I
workforce,
want him to
enhance our
say.
families, and make
He
it
really
easier
let
to
me
have the
down.
children that you want.
Governor, your
does
time
this
is
weird
up.
counting thing.
Senator, do you support a national paid leave program?
who counts
and
to three
if
like
so,
that?
For how long should employers be
Chinese
mandated
and
to pay their
Kim
employees
Jong-un.
while they are
Three-
home taking care
three-fingered
of their
people.
newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Commies.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She
He just
actually
said his
had
wife
access
has
to
all the
paid family
advantages.
leave because
You're
she worked
welcome.
for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of child care model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with child care. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide child care in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote
why is there
choice
federal money for
in how
child
we
care?
Why is there
deliver
federal money in
family
this at
care and
all,
how we
man?
promote
Just
child care?
stop.
Because look,
This
it
is a negative for
unacceptable.
both of them.
And, you know,
Yeah,
of course, Tim and I have
everyone
been
just
on the
lost the
campaign
point.
trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing.
This is the
between
easiest
going to
pivot.
work
It's
or
because of
taking care
pricing,
for
it's
their
because of
kids.
the
That is an
legalization.
incredible
Go to the
burden
economy.
to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator,
How about
thank you.
stay the hell out of my
You
flippin'
have
business,
also said, Senator
government.
Vance, many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on child care as they do on housing.
I want him
each
to be like,
month.
we should abolish the
So I
Federal
want to
Reserve.
get your thoughts
and
on
then walk
this.
off.
President Trump recently said, as much as child care is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive
so
compared to the
untalented,
kinds of
these
numbers
women.
we'll be taking in.
They should be raising
Is
children.
President Trump committed to
Obnoxious
the
little
$5,000
turds.
This is why we
per
should call
child
these people
tax credit
readers
that
and
you
not
have described?
moderators
You have
or
1 minute.
anchors.
Well, what
Presenters.
President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers.
You're gonna do
It's
that
the
by
heart of the Donald
raising the
Trump
prices.
economic
You're
plan.
gonna do it on
Cut
us.
taxes for American workers and American families. Cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are
penalize
shipping
3 times. I think
jobs
Tim's
overseas.
drawings
That's
are
the
getting
heart
to
of the
him.
economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is
It's
saying
so
is that when we
large.
bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, child care options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the child care shortage?
He just
because,
said.
as Tim said, a lot of the child care shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential
They're
service.
going to induce people to
Thank
do
you,
that
Senator.
by giving
Governor
government
Walz,
money to
your
daycare
ticket
centers.
also has
The
some
worst.
child care
How
tax credit
very
proposals.
conservative.
Do you think Congress
awful.
will agree to
Can
the
my wife get a
$6,000
child care tax
for
credit?
newborns
She's doing
and
a
Yeah,
great job.
$2,000
exactly. It's
credit
like
for
a-
children
like a
over
school,
the age of 6,
charter school, right?
as your campaign has promised. Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's $5,000 or $6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by by
$6,000
not
pays
paying
for how
people. I don't
much?
think Senator Vance are that
3
that
months
far
of
apart. I'm not
childcare?
opposed to what he's talking about on
how
on
can you
options.
afford to
We've done
work at that
scholarship
rate?
types of things. I think we need to be open to making
That's my
the case.
freaking
But
was
the
my
issue
mortgage
here
when I
is
had a house
the
before
question you
I had to
ask
sell
is,
it because I
if
didn't
you're
have a
gonna
job.
$500 a
for it
week.
with these tariffs, that's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000
This
in
is
the
the
hole.
dumbest
That's Warren
line of
School. That's
questioning.
his alma mater. And
These
so I
people should
think the
just-
issue here is, if those
NBC
members of
is
Congress,
retarded.
I can't believe they're not. When I go
CBS
to
is retarded,
businesses,
sorry.
sure, they'll talk about taxes
all
sometime,
are.
but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing because we know the problem is, especially in a state like
know,
Minnesota,
they haven't mentioned
we need more
Ukraine
workers
or
because
Russia.
our
Stop
Talking
economy's
about
in the
Minnesota.
line.
Nobody's been to
Workforce.
Minnesota in a long
Governor,
time.
thank you.
People go to
We need to move
Wisconsin.
on.
Better.
Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top
The
issue for
state of
Americans after the
democracy.
economy
Go F
and
yourself.
inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and
January
others filed
6th. Here it comes.
62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future.
He says,
We need to
first
figure
of
out how
all,
to solve
to
the
answer every
inflation
question.
crisis
It's kind of
caused by
Brady.
Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president, Donald Trump left the White House, and now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here, and I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on
Is
things
this his
that I think
closing
I might have
statement?
with the senator. But
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this, and the fact is that I don't think we can be a frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day, some with the American flag. Several later died. And it wasn't just in there.
It didn't have anything to do with that, by the way.
Gathered on the state Capitol grounds
I mean, suicide,
in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and
mean
Mike
the
Pence standing there as they
BLM
were
riots that
chanting,
you allowed to happen?
hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So
Mike Pence didn't get hung.
It was
What are you talking about, bro?
Over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than
He
winning
really
an
likes to talk
election.
about how he's with
you
kids.
shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win.
Stolen.
That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People
Come on, give me a
hear
project.
that.
Come
So
on. Come
I
on.
think this
Get there.
issue of settling our differences at the ballot box.
How about the battle box? I like the
Imprisoning your
battle
political
honest
opponent.
about
He
it,
went there.
but to deny what
Kamala
happened
Harris
on
actually
January
find a
6th, the first
dumber running
time
mate than
in
she is?
American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well,
Yes, I do.
First of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was
That sounds true.
happened. Donald
check.
Trump can do it.
Squirrels
And
are not
all of us say
snorkels.
there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just
really?
think for everyone tonight.
I can't believe that Vance didn't go to the
thank Senator Vance.
imprison your political opponent.
I think this is the conversation they want to hear.
So
and I
easy.
think there's a lot of agreement, but this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind?
Did Kamala
in the
Harris get a
wake
single
of the
vote?
2020
Democracy?
COVID situation?
That is
Has she tried to-
that is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the
threatening or
power
hate
of
speech.
government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That
just
is a
said there's
threat
no
to
right to hate
democracy that
speech.
will
Yeah.
long outlive this present political
I very
moment.
much like
I would
this.
like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater.
Yes, you
the
can.
test.
You can.
That's the Supreme Court test.
Yes,
Tim,
you
fire in
can.
a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't
Senator,
wear
the
masks.
governor does
That's
have the
not
floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor
You
does have
can
the floor
yell
for 1
fire
minute to
in a
respond
crowded
to you.
theater.
Yeah, well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there
True.
who
No, it's
refused,
private
and now
industry.
again, and this I'm pretty shocked
Might
by
have
this.
cancer,
He lost
doesn't
the
run
election.
Facebook.
This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if
What kind of firewall?
knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? will you keep your oath of office even if the president doesn't? And I think
just said you
Kamala
don't
Harris
believe
would
in the
agree
First
with
Amendment
me.
or the
She
Second
would agree
Amendment.
if she didn't
Americans
think I would
don't
do
take an
that.
oath of office.
Because of course that's what we would do. So America,
so
I think
weird.
you've got a really clear choice on this
does have
election
cancer.
of who's going to honor
does.
that
Brain
democracy
cancer.
and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News vice presidential debate continues.
So happy with themselves.
America decides. There's like, there's all that traffic going. Where are all these people going at night?
Yeah.
All right.
We're-
What are we doing here, dude?
I am more convinced of ever in my decision to vote for Garrett Boyle in 2024. He would have had a great argument with Tim Walz there about the First Amendment. It would have been passionate. There would have been Bible verses.
There would have been case law cited.
There
would
would
have
have
been
been. He would have definitely pulled up a Middle Tennessee University First Amendment website and just chapter and verse had it down. Yes, Tim, you can yell fire in a crowded theater. And very contrary to what Nancy Pelosi says, you can't yell wolf in a crowded theater, but no, it's actually fire. And
I want to
that
yell
was bad
wolf. I'm going to
case
do
law.
that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to go and yell wolf somewhere. I'm also going to yell about Project 2025.
Oh, no.
Is that it?
Project 2025.
It's so dumb. Why didn't I thought they would be banging on that drum more?
I really thought that was going to be the drinking game. That was going to be the prop bet.
Yeah, it was
because
going to be a
that
nonstop like bass that they just touched over and over.
I think they Walz was downplaying his performance to go into it, from what I understand, saying, "Well, this isn't my strong suit." He tried to play it down, and let me just say, he delivered on that promise to suck.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the temperament was there, at least that they could actually have a conversation, but he got mopped all over the floor. I mean, if it was a fight, it would have been stopped.
He's not that good. He talks about his state a lot, which is not universalizable. You can't universalize the experience of being in Minnesota. And the sad thing is that people are running out of Minnesota. In fact, I was talking to my buddy Pete today. He's a business owner. He employs like a handful of people, like, I don't know, like maybe a dozen people. Left the state, just moved to Montana. Why? Freedom. Why? First Amendment, Second Amendment. All of his businesses are related to that. Nobody wants to hang out in a place where somebody decides like, oh, not only am I going to turn the state police on you, who are going to pepperball the hell out of you for sitting on your own balcony or sitting on your own porch, but they're also, they're going to just outlaw the guns that you use. And he's like, that's his business.
Well, and Minnesota it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what people look for in family values. So Minnesota's big thing is family values. They're going to give more paternity leave and child tax credits. So just more government stuff, as opposed to, I don't know, like freeing up school choice.
Every single thing that he's answered so far has been a government solution.
Yeah.
I would love to see. Nobody's made a personal
assets.
responsibility argument. Yeah.
He has no assets. He has a government pension from the National Guard, from Congress, as a teacher, as now the governor. That is where he gets his wealth from. He doesn't have a 401k, an IRA. I don't know if he even owns the house that he claims that it shouldn't be a commodity.
He's like paycheck to paycheck on government paychecks. And
so he's basically like every GS-15 and above in Washington, D.C.
It's so crazy. It's so crazy to see people that have no like demonstrable ability. Like we're looking at two people basically that have no demonstrable ability to handle money and have never worked in the private sector, saying they want to be the boss, the CEO of the United States.
They should control your life.
They should control nobody's. They're not even good at their own.
We have and the moderators there saying we have a child care crisis. I haven't.
Well,
heard
those
it
ladies are my favorite.
that way.
They have beautiful eyes. I'll just say that.
Thank you, Margaret.
But they're Margaret, would you like to say something? Yes. What's the other lady's name?
I don't know.
I heard the Margaret
Maud.
over and over again. Here we go. Watch. They're coming back in. It's very exciting. This is a weird room.
Vice presidential
That's
debate,
Nora.
it is now time for
That's
the
Nora. I
closing
recognize her.
statement. Senator
Nora.
Vance
Here
won
comes
the
closing
virtual
statements. Let's
coin
get it.
toss and elected to go last. So
What is it?
Governor
Why not a
Walz,
real coin
you
toss?
are
The
first.
hell?
You have 2 minutes.
They should just have
Well,
it. Yeah.
thank you,
Let's do
Senator
it.
Vance. Thank you to CBS News. And most importantly, thank
Thank
you
you
to all
to
of
you
you. If you're
for
still up
watching.
and the
Minnesota.
folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself.
They just
Now,
want to
look,
be,
we all know
in your pocketbook.
who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya
They're
Angelou
going to
said,
run on abortion.
believe him when he told you
abortion,
that. His
abortion.
first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road.
No
Excuse
kidding.
me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself.
Oh my
Kamala
God,
Harris is
dude, are
bringing
you
us
talking
new
to
way
a fourth
forward.
grade class?
She's bringing
Oh,
us
yeah,
a
that's all
politics
you
of
do.
joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle
politics
class,
of
and
joy.
she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that
She's
opportunity
the
and
vice
everybody
president.
gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator
That was really
Vance,
gay.
your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies.
Chicken
I
in every
believe
pot.
that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl, and that too has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until Election Day. Please get out and vote. And for all of us here at CBS News, thank you.
Who's doing that with the
and
camera?
Good night.
It's a small room. That's a really small room.
Yeah, there's some goofy boom that they're using.
A handshake, and that's the end. Tim Walz, J.D. Vance.
A handshake, and that's the end, and that's why you watch us here on NBC. That's what you're looking for when you're watching these presidential debates. What we're going to see now is hugs and kisses Awkward. He's never
Handshakes.
hugged.
He shakes his wife's hand.
Not really into hugging women in general, but he's going to
No,
make an
just
exception.
small children.
Now the ladies are going to shake hands. Everyone's shaking hands. The hands are being shaken, and some people are getting hugs. Why did Nora give Tim a hug? That was nice.
That's just
Got
brutal.
Oh, is that his? Oh, those are spouses.
Lester Holt, who's
those are freaking spouses. Dude, I thought that was the moderators getting hugs. Okay, I'm dumb. That just tells us where we're at for the night. All right, you got any final thoughts on this thing, Steve? I feel like we're all dumber, but what do you got?
I mean, it was a substantive debate, far more than the presidential one.
Way more.
I mean, JD Vance, I think, demonstrated.
Oh no, it's Project 2025.
We didn't get to do nearly as much Mystery Science Theater as last time, probably because it actually was a substantive exchange for the most part. I think JD Vance showed why he's a good running mate for Donald Trump. He articulated that and defended it and was clearly the winner, but unfortunately the vice presidential debates don't typically have any factor on the re-election.
Yeah, it just doesn't make a difference at all. It doesn't matter to anybody.
Tim Walz has cancer, though.
Tim Walz may or may not have cancer, folks.
And he might also be friends with mass shooters.
He also has friends who are school shooters. That was some of the weirder things that I've heard. He's been known to misspeak. Sometimes he says he was at
knucklehead.
Listen, sometimes he says he was at Tiananmen Square, but what he was really was not at Tiananmen Square.
I mean, he was definitely not taking small children to China to learn about how government works.
But he did learn a lot about government when he went to Chinese.
And
I refuse to say China. I don't know if you know this about me, but I won't say it. Also, apparently people who have gray hair also may all have cancer. So it's a possibility. Gray hair.
Three fingers.
Could be an indicator. Yeah, Vance didn't hurt anybody's chances there. I don't think he won anybody over. I don't think anybody's up to win at this point. I think we're just going through the formalities. But thanks for all of you who joined us for the live stream. And I hope you guys walked away with a little sense of humor about how silly our nation is, which we are a silly nation right now. Sadly, I think that JD Vance is smarter than the other three people at the top of the tickets combined.
Plus the moderators.
Including maybe the moderators. But the overall takeaway is that everybody got caught up about how much of that time did we spend talking about childcare?
We talked a lot more about childcare than we did about Russia. You know, the current global
or the fact that there's like flipping bombs,
war.
like there are ballistic missiles flying at Israel right now, about to kick off into like Middle Eastern conflict, super aggressive. We're gonna have a second really legitimate hot war.
And we need to have a chicken in every pot.
And a Buick in every driveway. What was it? It was a Chevy. What was the?
I don't know. We don't buy American anymore.
I'm gonna buy American. I've been looking at a Ford F-150. I think I'm gonna. So I gave my truck away. And
well,
for those
you did it in a very suspendable way too.
Yeah, I gave it to a suspendable. but yeah, I think I'm gonna end up with another one. All right. That's okay. So the request has been maybe auctioning off the doodle. We might do that at some point in time, but I'm pretty sure this is a sneak peek of what was going on Tim Walz's little notebook there. For all of you guys that are following the program, let me just plug some sponsors and say, if you're thinking things are going to get weird and you want to invest in something capable as I do, let me pull it out of my weapon here. You might want to have some extra roundage in your micro pistols, which is what I roll around with right now. I was actually sitting next to a suppressed Glock 43X. You guys can get, that's not it. Yes, you can get a sweet deal going to Shield Arms. Those are my friends over there. They're out of Montana, America. They don't take kindly to those who think that Minnesota is the right answer. ShieldArms.com, ShieldArms.com. Check it out. Promo code KYLE. Those are all in the show notes. If you guys want, you'll save 5%. So nothing there. If you're looking at buying an upgrade, save you something when you're doing so. You guys can also check out my buddies over at Mad Hat Jerky. It's madhatjerky.com/Kyle. It's an outstanding snack. Sometimes I eat it at night. My kid, he can't eat steak. He can't eat chicken, but he'll eat Mad Hat Jerky. It's very good. Check out the black truffle. Get the USDA Prime if you guys want to get the best. And yeah. And you can always check out our locals channel at kyleserafin.com, which is strangely a weird color right now. I'm going to figure out why it changed color from the other ones. But locals, it's kyleserafin.com if you guys want to join and get behind the scenes on the Kyle Serafin Show community, which is a really good group. They're actually running through the entire thing. And they've been throwing up like memes in the chat over on locals. You can actually put up like pictures, like full on pictures. So it's nothing but like Tim Walz sticking out of a tampon and other funny things. So they were getting after it. In any case, Steve, are you and I going to do Friday this week?
All around. I'll be here for it. We got to make up for last time. Lots of laughs about Don Rickles potentially becoming the vice president of the United States.
Except he's not funny. Don Rickles was actually like mean and funny. This guy's like a gay Don Rickles.
Oh, Denny Hastert vibes all around. Anytime that guy talks, hide your children, hide your wives.
True, so true. All right, folks, that's what we're going to do for the day. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you guys in the morning. If you guys don't normally hear our podcast, you can do that. It's rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. You can find us on X. You can find us on YouTube, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we go live at 0930 Eastern Time. On behalf of my buddy Steve Friend, have a great night. We'll talk to you again soon.